Hello, my loves. I'm Ellie Frost, and I help people rapidly and radically heal and transform during and after narcissistic abuse. And we're talking today about the declaration, making a declaration of freedom from the narcissist. And actually, in this video, I'm just going to share a story about when I did this, right? And I'm not recommending you do it in the way I did it in this story, because it wasn't very planned out strategically for the future. But I'll just tell you when I did it, right? And the reason I like sharing stories is because you might see bits of yourself in my story, you might recognize things, and it might relate to you. So I was in a relationship with a covert narcissist. I didn't see that coming. I'd actually had a relationship with a narcissist just prior to this one, but the guy before him was very overt. Yeah? I mean, that's a whole other story in itself. This is a very spiritual process we go through in narcissistic abuse. And actually, the guy before the ex had a nickname. And one day I saw his driving license and I had chills, because he had my dad's first two names the other way round, right? So my dad's first name was my ex's middle name, and my dad's middle name was my ex before the ex's first name. That gave me chills. And that ex before the ex was the one that really triggered me into the awakening about narcissism. I didn't know what a narcissist really was before that. I knew a little bit. I had some ideas. I thought I'd met a couple, but that put me on a whole new trajectory. It explained the relationship I had with my own father once I got on this learning journey. And it really opened my eyes to what narcissism really was. It was the beginning of my deep study into this topic. But anyway, let's talk about the more recent ex. So he's a covert narcissist. I meet him, there's an instant attraction. That in itself isn't a red flag, guys. You know, we can feel, excuse me, instant attraction. I've got to have a drink. This is not a healthy drink, but I'm having it. We can feel an instant attraction. And I didn't see it coming. Now, what I teach now is, in fact, all narcissists are the same. The internet kind of overcomplicates this. People are too concerned with dissecting the differences between them, which can be helpful, right? To help you identify which one you've had, which flavour you've sampled. I've probably sampled them all by now. But they all actually follow the same playbook. Their behaviours are very similar. The main difference between an overt narcissist and a covert one is an overt one is pretty much an extrovert, right? And they're likely to be more overtly aggressive, where a covert one is an introvert and more likely to be more passive aggressive. This particular flavour, my ex, the latest ex that was a narcissist, was also quite altruistic. You hear about that on the internet as well, altruistic narcissists. And those are the ones that, you know, but remember, I don't want to overcomplicate this. Narcissists are all the same. They're all motivated and wired the same way. They all care about their image. An altruistic one throws you off, like a religious one, like a spiritual one often throws you off, because the way that part of the way they portray their image to the outside world is that they're a really good person. Right, an altruistic one is the one that seems really charitable, the one that talks about how much they love helping people. So this was my last ex-narcissist. And we had, right, often we do, some really cool things in common. Like, we both liked to travel, like, and we liked our style of travel. We both, we worked out a lot together in the gym. We had, you know, our lifestyles really did fit, or seemed to fit, right, in lots of ways. So, and I'm not smelling the rat. I mean, I'm seeing some red flags, but I'm not sure that can I lie about this? No, I can't. I can't lie about it to save my life, nor would I want to. I did have a suspicion. I did also talk myself out of it early on, because I thought maybe I'm being oversensitive. Now I've got this kind of PhD, well, self-learned PhD in narcissism. Like, you know, maybe I am being too sensitive, right? Don't forget, I spent years, decades in narcissistic abuse being told how I'm too sensitive and that I'm wrong and everything that I'm thinking is wrong. So, you know, I still had that default in me wanting to question myself. Not just that, I wanted to be in the cognitive dissonance. I didn't want to admit that the guy that I now really fancied, there was a big physical attraction between us and had some things in common with, could be a narcissist, right? And he was, right? Anyway, let's fast forward the relationship to 2 years down the line. And again, I think I was in denial because I'd just made some moves for our future, as you do when a relationship's about to end, right? And it wasn't about to end, but I had definitely put some boundaries in, which didn't work very well. I definitely was aware of the red flags. My health was kind of deteriorating a bit, like I wasn't feeling too good. Which always happens with narcissists. And anyway, so I was trying to build. I was desperately trying to build. And of course, because he's a narcissist, he talks a good talk and never walked the walk, right? He just liked watching my efforts and watching me being traumatized and watching me, you know, picking me up and dropping me down. Anyway, as sensible as this was not, I decided, because we were living in quite a small place, to invest in a bigger place for us to live in, which would be a big financial burden, right? At a time when I had a big stream of revenue coming into my business that was literally about to end in a couple of months. So my income was going to go down. And I just bought a new car. You know, it was not a good time to start this investment. The relationship wasn't where it should have been. But I also saw it as, well, maybe I could just live there myself. I don't know. There was, I was in the narcissistic fog and I wasn't making the best decisions. As it happened, that I'd given him a couple of things that I'd said to him, you know, really were non-negotiables for in this relationship now. So I'd started putting some boundaries in, which and they were big things. Like, I'm not talking about little things. One of them was, this guy had told me he was divorced when I met him. As it happened, he was separated, what I later found out. And we'd been together for 2.5 years, right? And I'd said, I want you to get that divorce. That was one of the things. So anyway, he wasn't doing much about any of the things I talked about. And the relationship was getting worse because he was getting more comfortable and pretty much ruder to me. So I have now decided it was time to leave this relationship. At the time, he was contributing financially, and that was going to be a huge deal for me. I had nowhere else to go. I'd made this decision. Anyway, so one time he comes around and we've decided to live separately, right? Or I decided really. Anyway, so he comes around to give me his share of like the rent. And I say to him, I don't want or need anything from you anymore. At the time of saying this, in actual fact, I did need that. You know, like, it wasn't that I didn't need it to survive. It was more a declaration of freedom from him that I needed to make, because I no longer wanted to be under his control in any way, right? Including financially. Now, this was not a smart decision. I am now in a completely different space, and I teach my clients how to make strategic moves, how to control their emotions, how to do things that are planned out for their best futures. At this time, I was extremely triggered, and I was making a declaration to the universe, you know, that I just had enough of this shit. I grew up in a narcissistically abusive family. I had successful relationships that were not with narcissists. Then I moved countries and ended up in 2 narcissistically abusive relationships. I was done with narcissists at this point. It's interesting, isn't it? I was done with them, and now I teach people about them and help them through it. But I was done with being in relationships with them. So at that time, that decision made no sense. And it wasn't necessarily the smartest thing to do. But I did it as a declaration of freedom. The next few months were extremely difficult for me. I had to give up the place that I just got. I had nowhere else to live. I'm in a foreign country. I don't have any rights that other people do. It's harder for me to get leases and all sorts of things. I mean, I went through some real hurdles, right? It did work out, obviously, but like, it wasn't easy. And sometimes it depends on where you are emotionally, and it depends on what meaning you're giving things. To me, that was my stake in the ground. I said that was the last time I've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, and I won't be in one anymore. So it meant something. It was intentional, and I knew it was going to come with some shit. And I also was in a place where I also knew that I was kind of good at dealing with shit if I had to, right? And it wasn't easy shit. It was big shit. But like, when I said that, on paper, it wasn't true, right? There was no way that I could afford the lifestyle I just invested in and basically committed to without his input at that point. And I was willing to deal with the consequences of that, right? So sometimes in this cycle, you're going to have to make compromises or difficult decisions. You don't always have to. So I really am good at helping people get out in the best possible way. And part of that is being able to regulate our nervous system so that we're not triggered, right? So that we can be more strategic and more planned in stuff. And sometimes when you're really in a heightened emotional state and you've really fucking had it, it depends what you value most, right? At that moment, I valued my freedom more than I valued anything else, right? They were just things. They were things I could replace. Didn't know how yet, right? Because it was at a juncture when I explained earlier where in my business, I'd been doing a program with people for a year. Well, it was a business program that I'd run, but that had come to an end. And I didn't have anything in the pipeline to replace that level of income. So it is never convenient, right? When you leave a narcissist, there's always pieces to pick up. I didn't have children with a narcissist, but I was financially intertwined. I had to leave that community, which I was glad to in the end, because he ran a great big smear campaign against me, obviously. But my whole life had to change again. It wasn't easy. Do I regret that move? No, not at all. Would I advise it to my clients to do it in the way I did it? I am really good at helping them be super smart in how they do things. If I went back to myself, would I have taken his money in that moment just to make things easier? No, I wouldn't, personally. I wouldn't. Because for me, that wasn't the right move, just for me. Because of the intentional meaning I gave that move. I knew at that moment I was telling the universe, this is my stake in the ground. I would take absolutely nothing from this narcissist, absolutely nothing. I don't care how impractical it is. It was just what I needed to do. I'm not recommending this to you guys. And it's not how I recommend things to my client. I weigh up options and I help them be very strategic to make sure they're financially stable as much as they can be. Because I also know how difficult it is not to be. But for me, that declaration was my first step in literally never going back in a narcissistically abusive relationship ever again. I was done. I'd learned everything I needed to learn. I wasn't going to kid myself anymore that this could work. I knew he was a narcissist for sure. I'd known for a while, if I was honest. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was still wondering if he could change. And if I'm really honest, actually, in that one, there were so many things, so many qualities about him that I did like. Yeah, maybe some of them weren't genuine, but there were so many ticks in my boxes that it was a really difficult one for me to leave. But what was missing was true love, was empathy, was compassion, was care. Was he going to be a man to take care of my welfare? Absolutely not. He would keep putting me through this cycle of highs and lows, the roller coaster. I mean, all sorts of things that were just shitty about it, really shitty. So that tiny little bit of good times was actually a lie. And the more I saw through him, the less any of that felt good anyway. And you'll find that with narcissists. It's like once you've seen who they really are, they can't love bomb you anymore. The love, people say when they break up, I just want the love bomb, right? But when you've really seen that person for who they are, they can't love bomb you anymore because it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And that was the thing. The spell had worn off, right? So declarations of freedom, you could write it to yourself. You can make a vow to yourself. You could commit to yourself that your new, I teach people how to set new standards and boundaries in life of what they want, what they will expect, what they will tolerate, right? And what they won't. And like living by our values, you know, this man was not in alignment with my values. So making a declaration of freedom from the narcissist. I mean, it's something you can do. You don't have to say it to the narcissist, by the way, because a lot of people say to the narcissist, I will not put up with this anymore. And, you know, I teach people all the time, boundaries are not a threat. Boundaries are a deal breaker. Don't use them as a threat because it waters down your authority and the amount of respect you'll get from people. A boundary is a deal breaker. Doesn't always have to be walking away. A boundary could be, if you like, monogamy, right? If you cheat on me, I will leave, right? But a boundary can also be to your friend, if you continue to shout at me, I'm going to leave the room. Yeah? We can talk tomorrow, right? It's a boundary is a deal breaker with a consequence. It's an action with a consequence. If you do this, then this will be the result. And that's where I stand. That's a boundary. We don't have to have many boundaries, but the ones we have, we must stick by. They are not a threat, right? I will leave the room. So you have a choice. You either keep shouting and I leave, or you can calm down and we can talk nicely and I will stay. Boundaries are crystal clear. But if you use them as threats, then no one will ever respect them because they'll know that they're movable. Boundaries are not movable, right? That's why we don't have tons of them. Declaration of freedom to the narcissist is something you can write in your journal. It's something that you can declare to yourself, right? What will I accept? What will I no longer accept? What do I think I need from this person, right? Because I promise you, in this universe, I've been through so many ups and downs in life. I've been through success in business, failure in business, all sorts of stuff. And what I would say to you is you can rebuild from anything. Do you want to? Probably not. I didn't want to have to, especially as we get older, we don't want to. But like, it's possible. But living in alignment with your values and who you truly are and what you believe in, right, is the only thing that matters. I tell my clients that all the time. You know, when I know I've been true to me, I sleep well at night. When I betray myself, don't sleep at all. The worst betrayal we make is to ourselves in these cycles, right? You don't have to be controlled. You don't have to be bought. You don't have to be manipulated. You don't. Once you see what's going on, the jig is up, right? And then the question is, what are you going to do with it? Declarations of freedom, right, are when we set ourselves free, right? When we just, and when you say that to the universe, when you put a stake like in the ground, the universe responds. You know what? There have been great big tragedies in my life, great big things to overcome, but there have been huge blessings too. Why? Because the universe responds to courage, right? When you're brave enough to go, hey, by the way, this isn't for me anymore. And the universe might test you and go, well, here's another one. Let's just see if she goes, right? Let's just test her a little bit, right? Does she mean it? When you show the universe you're serious about it, right? The universe does step up, right? As long as you can hold your energy. And that's one of the big things I teach people is angelic match, manifestation, how to hold their energy. Because we don't want to just get out of something into something worse. We want to get out and know that we can rebuild. I hope you've liked this video. If it's useful, let me know. If you like these stories, let me know. Lots of love. I'll speak to you soon.